Welcome to Stylist Soul Tribe Conversations. I'm your host, Lisa Huff. Over the last 5 years, I've coached hundreds of hairstylists and beauty industry professionals, helping them work their dream schedules exclusively with their dream clientele and earn their dream income, all while fostering genuine connections and lifelong friendships inside the beauty industry. In this podcast, we dive deep into abundance, manifestation, business building strategies, and creating a life that you are truly proud of, both behind the chair and at home. Are you ready to embark on a journey of personal growth, success, and sisterhood? Then hit that subscribe button now and get ready to experience the pure magic of Stylist Soul Tribe Conversations. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Stylist Soul Tribe Conversations. I am here with a special guest, Tawny Palm. Tawny is an extension and blonding specialist in Colorado Springs, Colorado, who has over tripled her income over the last 3 years behind the chair. She's one of the most inspiring members of Stylist Soul Tribe and has crafted a business that allows her to take multiple months off each year to travel the world with her husband. She just started a podcast of her own called Radiant Resilience, which we just recorded an episode on her podcast yesterday, where I opened up big time and I'm still experiencing a bit of a vulnerability hangover from.
Oh, no.
So Tawny, sweet friend, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's so nice to be here. Finally, I feel like we had to reschedule this a couple times. So
We did, but I also believe that like the timing happens for a reason, and like it's supposed to, we're recording when we're supposed to record. So
yeah,
I'm really excited. I'm really grateful to have you here. So obviously we talked a little bit before we hit record. I'm amazed by you. I've known you. I've been in your corner for, a few years now. I'm amazed at the growth that you've seen. So let's kind of start there. I would love to hear a bit of your story, what you think some of those, factors are that has helped you see the growth that you've seen.
All right. Well, do you want me to go back to like beginning of hair days?
I mean, you can if that feels good. I just know we have a lot of ground to
Yeah.
cover. So yeah, definitely tell us like how you got into it and then specifically these huge numbers you've seen these last 3 years.
Yeah. So I went to beauty school while I was in high school during my senior year of high school and then went straight into doing hair.
Yeah.
Right after that, I worked at a commission salon in Castle Rock, Colorado is where I grew up.
Cool.
And so I started working there and it was a Summit salon.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're still called Summit.
Yep, I think so. I know there's one in my town like that.
Yeah. So she was like a Redken and Pureology salon that we did
Mhm.
commission and it was the levels and all that stuff.
Yep.
And I worked there for quite a while and then started traveling with my husband. And we can touch on that a little bit more
Mhm.
later, but started traveling with my husband. So I quit. And then while I was on one of my trips, she was like, when are you going to come back and work for me? Because I had come back in between.
So you would just like quit when you would go on these long trips because the salon wouldn't allow you to take off that much time and still keep your job?
I did initially, yeah,
Okay.
because I did. Well, our very first trip was 5 months long, so
Okay.
that was a little
That's
bit
kind of, you
harder
have to quit for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then I also lived in Australia for a year, and I worked in Alaska for a year. So, these things that we were doing
That
didn't.
required you to quit. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So at one point she was like, when are you gonna come back and work for me? We had a conversation about, I want to keep traveling. How can we make that work? We made it work. And then I was there for, well, since till 2014.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I decided I was going to go booth rental, have a little bit more freedom, also
How
slightly.
many years into your career was that?
Oh, so if that was 2014, then I'm almost 10 years. So 9
Okay.
years.
Well,
Decided to go booth rental and have a little bit more freedom. I was a little bit afraid because, booth rental and traveling and all of that. And yeah, I realized when I went booth rental how sheltered of a life I was living in the commission world.
yeah. And especially in the Summit salon world. Not that it's good or
Yes.
bad or anything like that. A lot of people say that like Aveda salons as well. It is its own world. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And there were a couple times that I tried to promote some outside classes that were outside of the Redken Summit, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And the flyers would be taken down at the salon
Okay.
and stuff like that. So I was just like, oh my gosh, So when I went booth rental, I realized this entire new world of products, of
Industry, yeah.
classes. I even helped a little bit on Denver Fashion Week for a couple years in a row.
Wow.
I just like really dove into it and learned so much in that time frame. However, all of that was hair related, not much of it was business related. I was just
Yeah,
kind of rolling with the punches as far
totally.
as business goes. And then fast forward to 2020, COVID.
Yeah.
We were shut down for about 6 weeks.
Okay.
So not as bad as a lot of other
Yeah.
people, but still terrifying because we didn't know how
Yeah.
long.
We all thought
So
it was 2 weeks when we first left. So yeah, it was
yeah.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was feeling pretty useless.
Mm.
My husband and I owned a restaurant as well, and he was working that. And we had to cut back on all our staff too. So I wasn't really working there. And so
Yeah.
I was feeling pretty bored and useless.
Fair.
So I decided to, I don't know, I think Britt Siva's ads started popping up randomly on my Instagram, on my Facebook. And I started listening to her podcast, and I think she did a free course in that time period that was like a free week long,
Yeah.
and I got completely hooked. And so I dove into Thriver Society, and because I had the time off, which was really great for early stages of Thriver Society. If
Yeah.
anybody's ever done that program, there's a lot to get it
It's a
started.
master's degree. There's a
Yeah.
lot of content in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had to reevaluate all of my branding. My original business name when I went booth rental was Sheer Elegance.
Okay.
And
Wow.
play on words, sheer, SHEAR.
Yeah. We've all seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's still my legal business name, but
Yeah.
I realized when doing Thriver Society that
branding.
I didn't want to specialize in haircuts.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, this totally just tells everyone I do haircuts.
And you don't like doing haircuts at all. So that's really not what you were trying to portray. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can do haircuts, obviously,
For sure.
but they're definitely not top of the list favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
So dove into Thriver Society, started niching down, specializing, and implementing a lot of her
teachings,
processes and teachings. And then that opened up a whole new world of people too, because even just the people from my 2020 class had started doing their own coaching programs too.
Yeah.
So I think I came across you, and I came across Hunter and Angie and all of these other people that were teaching similar-ish things to Thrivers, but in a different way too.
Yeah, our own little take on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I jumped into Hunter's PvP, and then, jumped into Soul Tribe, and just doing all of those things. I learned so much about the business aspect of doing hair, which is not the part we all really want to do.
Yeah. But I think you are someone from the outside looking in. One, I think your experience in Soul Tribe, and I think you said this yesterday when we talked to, and I don't even really remember, honestly, onboarding you. Time is crazy. I feel like it's been forever. I feel like it, but I think we did start with one-on-one coaching calls. And I think what makes you, just in my brain, special amongst everyone is you are someone that continuously does one-on-one coaching, and you really, really, really take action, Tawny. So I know you know that, but I just need to call it out that. And that's why I like to highlight certain members that have really seen immense growth, and just pay attention to what it is about those people, where all the people have kind of consumed the same content. They know the right things to do, but you really, really, really take action. It's been really fascinating watching you niching down, getting serious about your target market, knowing who it is you want to service and the clients you want to do, having the difficult conversations of letting the clients go. I have helped you through a lot of that, and that is not easy. And just getting really clear and taking action when things need to be done. And even still, we all have our moments of panic and freak out, and every once in a while you'll be like, Lisa, everything's falling apart. And we take a look at your business and it's it's really not. You really have such a solid, well-oiled machine. I'm so impressed by your business, and that's just the parts that I really want to try to share with others, because a lot of people will just listen and consume, but you really, really, really take action.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's not easy to do some of those things, to have those difficult conversations with those difficult clients, to enforce cancellation policies, to And then, I do a lot of the digital forms and a lot of the
Mhm.
when I get a new client, it's all automated and stuff, which I
Yeah.
know some people don't like, but I have some clients that have been like, yeah, I'm not going to fill that form out. And I'm like, okay, well, then I guess we're not a good fit because
Mm.
that's how I run my business. And it's taken a lot of time to
Yeah.
get to that
Well, and
point.
there's also a lot of people in Soul Tribe and everyone, like you said, have their different takes in these forms. And what Tawny's talking about is PvP and his hunter. So if you guys haven't
Mhm.
taken it, I think it's, well, while we're talking, the doors are open. They're not going to be open by the time this podcast drops, but that's where you learned all that. But there are also a lot of people in Soul Tribe who do implement that and their clients don't love it and they kind of pull away from it with good reason. But you somehow also your marketing is so dialed in that even the clients that don't want to participate in the way you run your business, there's always a steady stream of new ones. And that's not
Yeah.
easy for all stylists. And you really have done a good job with that, whether it's word of mouth. I know you use, Courtney, she's been on the podcast, Good Richard
Yeah.
Media for your social media content. So you've just really, again, to me, it feels like a big, well-oiled machine. There's this little
Yes.
dial turning over here, there's this thing going, and all the pieces work together and makes it all keep flowing, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things that's been said about the industry recently is that, if you don't stand out to some degree for guest experience and things like that, and doing unique things in the salon and stepping up another level, you're
Hmm.
going to get left behind here soon because
Hmm.
we're getting an influx of all of these people wanting to do it. And,
Yeah.
and I see it in my own salon as well. I
Hmm.
mean, I see the girls we still have girls who are not on social media at all. And
Hmm.
I'm like, but it's free marketing.
Yeah,
No, I don't love the personal aspect of social
for
media.
sure.
If I didn't have a business on there, then I definitely would probably be off of it. My husband's been off of social media for like
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah.
But it's so great. And also I think I appreciate that a little bit more because my mom, her job for forever, because she's a graphic design artist, was doing
Okay.
newsletters. So she was
Mm.
selling to businesses to do print advertising while I
Mm.
was growing up. So I have a very good idea of what that costs and what that looks like.
Yeah.
And it's so expensive. And we are so lucky to
Wow.
have social media as an option.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
So is that how you would say majority of your clients find you? Like when they fill out your
mhm.
forms, is it referrals? Is it Instagram? Is it Google? What is it right
I
now?
would say mostly Google and Facebook. I think I get
Okay.
a decent amount because of the age range, I think more so
Mm-hmm.
of what I go for. So,
How
but I
often are you updating your Google right now?
oh gosh, I try to keep up with it. I'm kind of bad at the Google
Yeah,
part of things, but I was
but it's
actually just
working.
recently, yeah, it is working.
That's great.
Uh, yeah, I was actually just working with another Soul Tribe member about Google ads and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so talking about trying to do that and get your SEO all balanced out and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So I've been working on that to try to get it because I recently looked at where I was when you Google Castle Rock
Yeah,
hairstylists or salons, and it was pretty far down the list, but I do have a lot of reviews on there.
yeah.
So yeah, I always ask people, when they do come in, well, how did you find me? One,
Mm-hmm.
so, okay, they say Google. Then what made you choose me
Mm-hmm.
too?
Because then
Because
Google leads to your website, which is the whole funnel. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even if they say Facebook too, because how many times do you
Mm-hmm.
see somebody posting on Facebook, I'm looking for a hairdresser, and they get
Yeah.
500 million
Yeah.
suggestions? I'm like, is that really better than Google?
Mm-hmm.
And looking at
Mm-hmm.
reviews and stuff, because you
Yeah.
get everybody suggests their hairdresser on there. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Castle Rock is a relatively small town. And I will say that it is also a very wealthy area. And so
Mm-hmm.
that has also helped
Oh,
me
yeah.
grow like I have being in
Mhm.
a more wealthy
And
environment.
positioning yourself in that market as a
Mhm.
high-end, high-ticket stylist and like stepping into that perceived value and owning that and like running your business like that's actually who you are, I think has helped a ton. I love that. Okay, thank you for sharing all that. So
Yeah.
anything else major that you can think of that I haven't already mentioned that has caused that like large growth? Or not really?
I mean, not really. I think just being consistent and sticking to your processes and
Hmm.
boundaries. And, it is hard, but now I have had to have those firing conversations with clients as we talked about, but I now there are very few days I go to work and I'm like, ugh, I have that client today.
Yeah.
So I have that too, which makes it so much more enjoyable. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I just think being consistent, implementing the things, listening to advice and doing it. Because
Yeah.
it's
And that's why I
scary,
feel the
but
way I do about the cycle of success too is you love your schedule, you love the clients that you work with, and you've gotten to the point where you're earning a great income. And that's kind of like the meat of that. So, okay, love that. Now let's dip into, because I think this is what makes you really unique and really fascinating. You and your husband, Colin, have prioritized, like you said, years and years and years ago, you got the travel bug and it has not gone away. It was 5 month trips. And when we say, oh, trips or vacations, people think a week, maybe 2 weeks if you're really splurging. No, Tawny regularly takes at least, I mean, 1 2 month vacation every single year and then multiple many week-long trips
yes.
throughout the year. So like tell us a little bit about how that started and how you've worked that in and how you've kept that such a non-negotiable while still seeing this incredible growth, because I think you're just goals. When people hear this, they're gonna be like, what the hell? I want to do that. And it really genuinely can be done.
It can. And it is, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I have struggles
Of
every time I
course.
go away
Yep. Next
with,
level, next devils. Yeah.
yeah, worrying about my clientele specifically. Obviously I'm going on vacation, but every time you take time away from the salon, you lose people. And it could be even a week vacation, people
Yep.
will lose people. It's pretty
Yep.
amazing, actually. So we started when he graduated from college in 2009. We got jobs in Alaska, and that was when I just quit. That was the first time I quit, and we went and did a summer in Alaska. And actually it was on that trip that we started learning, because seasonal workers are, because we were working a seasonal job.
Mm-hmm.
Seasonal workers are an interesting breed of people.
Mm.
And they work seasonal job after seasonal job, and in
Mm.
between they travel, which is super
Okay.
interesting. So
Yeah.
that was kind of where we first learned,
This is possible
yeah, and you don't have to spend thousands upon thousands upon
hmm
thousands of dollars
to travel.
to travel.
Hmm
Yeah, and there are a
hmm
lot of places around the world that are cheap and things like that.
hmm
So we learned that there. So then we came back and I worked at Cost Cutters for a short period of time because I just needed
hmm
hourly money
Yeah.
because we were going to leave again. So that's when we went and lived in Australia for a year.
Okay.
I did hair there. So I
Wow.
quit Cost Cutters, went there. I did hair for a year in Australia, which was a fantastic experience.
That's
And
awesome.
then, yeah, and then we came back and that was when I went back to work at the commission salon, and I worked for a few months, and then we went on our 5 month trip. So when I was working commission, it was a relatively easy thing to do because I would
Yeah.
just shuffle my clients off to
Another
other
stylist that made the same
stylists. And so
commission. Yeah.
so the owner would still make money, because they would typically be less busy stylists.
hmm
So they would be busier for a longer period of time. So it was a bit more challenging when I went booth rental.
hmm
And I have worked out a bit of a deal with the owner of my salon, which has been pretty
hmm
fantastic. And she's been great about it. But yeah, we've prioritized it. So I think when I was at the commission salon, we had one of the summit coaches come in,
hmm
and she didn't love that I did this traveling. Of course, she was coaching
hmm
my owner of my salon, like, you need to stop letting her do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But then I was going to probably leave. So she suggested that I start booking clients when I was going on a trip, book their appointment while I'm gone,
hmm
and book their first or
The
even
next
second
one.
appointment back with me
So
to
you know they're
ensure,
coming back with you. Yeah.
yes, to ensure they're coming back with me rather than me just coming back or relying on the stylist taking care of them to pre-book them back with me when I was
hmm
coming back.
hmm
And so that system started working really well for me.
Okay.
So when I went booth rental, that's pretty much what I started doing, is I would
Okay.
set all my clients up before I left
hmm
with, depending on how long the trip was, with another stylist. And then all my appointments when they came back to me.
Okay.
So it's tough. Like I said, every time I lose people to
Yeah.
some degree, absolutely. I have to be mentally and emotionally prepared for that. And
hmm
it still doesn't
And
really
deal with
make
the
it easy.
emotions that come up each time because they're going to. Because especially when you get to the point where you genuinely adore all of your clients, it really hurts because now they're all your favorites, you know? But like you said, you can go on a week-long trip and people still leave you. You cannot go on a trip in Clients will always have a wandering eye. And I
Yeah.
think, and that's what I am always reminding you of when you're like, shoot, this person who's genuinely my favorite, and then her two friends, canceled, clearly found another stylist. But it's like, Tawny, how many new guest requests did you receive last month? And you're like, well, 15. And it's like, okay, girl, you're good.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. It
Yeah.
sucks. It hurts. I mean,
Yeah.
we're emotional beings. We love our people, but like, just remembering this is the lifestyle that you want. This is very important to you. You would lose clients either way, as
Yeah.
long as you're keeping your business flowing where there's a steady stream of new people to fill those spaces. That's
Yeah.
kind of the key.
Yeah. And then, on a, I guess, personal note
Mm-hmm.
as well with the traveling, like realizing that it doesn't have to cost a fortune, because I know that's the other
Mm-hmm.
thing is like, I'm not bringing in income, right?
Mm-hmm.
In
During that
that time
time.
period. And then, I have to also financially plan ahead for that. But we've strategically picked destinations that are not that expensive.
Yeah.
The most expensive part is getting there.
Yeah.
However, I do backpack and I do public
Mm-hmm.
transport and I stay in hostels and
Mm-hmm.
I'll do street food from time to time. Like,
Uh-huh.
so,
It's so dang cool though. I think all the places you've been to places that I had never even heard of before, let alone plan to visit. So like real quick, just rattle off some of the spots you've been just for people to get an idea of what we're
oh
talking about.
gosh. Well, I guess this year I went to Colombia.
Mhm.
Some of my favorites are Nepal. I love Southeast Asia. So I've been to Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and I've been to the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia. I've been to Africa multiple times. So South Africa is one of my favorites. I've also been to Morocco, Egypt, Tanzania, Malawi, and then a little bit of Europe, but Europe is more expensive. So
Mhm. You
we
stay
haven't
away
done
from
it
there
as
more.
much.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just
Yeah.
telling a friend the other day, I haven't been to the UK, and she was like, what?
You've
I was
been
like,
everywhere. And that's where most people go on their first like
yeah,
international trip. But you guys
yeah.
really are just scrappy with the way that you travel and how you figure it out. And it'll be so cool. We'll be on Soul Tribe calls and Tawny will come in just super sunburnt with like a tiki hut behind her. We're like, Tawny, where are you? She's like surrounded by a
Yeah,
mosquito net. And she's like, she
yeah.
named some country I've never even heard of. There's like, monkeys howling in the background and
Yeah.
stuff. So it's really neat. It's really cool. I'm very, very, very impressed by you. And then obviously, I know you took your Turkey trip. I know through all of these things, I'm like, how do we even kind of navigate into? Because here we are really hyping you up, really like gassing the hell out of you. But there has been a lot of struggle since I've known you too, and well before I've known you. And Tawny's been on a serious infertility journey over the last many, many, many years. And so that's kind of I think the inspiration behind her podcast. So I'll make sure to link that below because she's
Thank
opening
you.
up big time and she's having a lot of people open up big time and just sharing stories with that. And I know I've told you this, but I'm going to say it before. I've learned so much about infertility from knowing you. I've learned the proper ways, not even proper, but just things that I never even would have thought of before, navigating sensitivities of people dealing with an infertility journey. So why don't you show how that like intermixes? Because through all of this, I mean, you guys have been, I mean, for the last, what, 6 years, you guys have been navigating this?
8.
8 years.
Yeah.
So how does
Mhm.
that weave into all of this as well? Share a little bit about that.
Oh gosh.
I
Well,
know
yeah.
we're talking about all the
It's
fun
okay.
stuff, but it's
It's
part of
okay.
your story. It really is.
And it's a huge part of my story
Huge.
at this point in my life. So if I cry, I'm sorry.
We're ready.
But yeah, so, with the lifestyle that we were living,
Hmm.
are living, we did put off having kids for quite some time. But I used to always say, like, okay, by 30, I got to start, looking into this because of the age, your
Hmm.
body starts
Yeah.
to shut down in that regard. So,
Can I ask you this real quick? I don't know if I've asked you this before. What before you guys even started trying, would you discuss like let's get our travel out of our system before we have kids, or were you hoping to be the family that takes the kids as well? Like you weren't going to stop this travel lifestyle, or you didn't really know?
correct.
Okay.
Correct. We were going to
Okay.
continue it. I mean, I'm very aware of the fact that it would have changed,
Totally. But it can
you
be
know,
done.
but I think it can be done. I mean, I
Absolutely.
follow family Instagram accounts that travel across
Mm-hmm.
the world, and I
Mm-hmm.
met a family last year in Honduras that
Oh,
they travel a ton. She's actually a traveling nurse, so when she's not working, they just
wow.
go. So
Wow.
it is possible for sure.
Okay.
I knew
Yeah,
that it wouldn't be the same type of
totally.
travel and maybe not the same destinations
Yeah.
either. Like I'm about to go on a pretty intense trip here in September, and I probably wouldn't bring a kid on that
To
trip.
where?
Pakistan and Oman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, you know, the destinations would change, the type of
For
travel would
sure.
change.
For sure.
So we were aware of that.
Yeah.
But we did want, because I always wanted my kids to experience the world
Yeah.
and not live that sheltered, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just American life. I
Yep.
want to share that experience because that experience alone has changed me as
It's
well.
who you and Colin are,
Mhm.
literally. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we were ultra cautious for many
Mhm.
years of
Mhm.
birth control,
Yeah.
condoms. I don't know if that's allowed to be said on
Yeah.
here,
Yep.
all the things.
There is no boundaries. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, you know, when you go through this stuff, your sex life becomes easier to talk about.
Yeah.
So we finally decided to pull the birth control at one
Mhm.
point, and we weren't actively trying. We were just seeing what
We'll see
happened.
what if it happens. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and nothing. And so then I started, I think about after 6 months of that, I started tracking a bit more, doing the
Mhm.
ovulation tests for about another year. And then I went to my OB and I was just like, hey, can we just run some, you know, standard tests, blood
Yeah.
work on me, semen analysis on him,
For sure.
see what happens. I think I was honestly convinced that it was going to all be fine and
Yeah.
we'll just keep trying, right?
Yeah.
Even though it had basically been a year and a half. So ran tests on me, everything came back fine. My husband's semen analysis, first one came back not so great. And she actually, my OB had sent us to fertility doctor to do
Mhm.
that. I don't know if just
Mhm.
normal offices do that. So
Yeah.
they like immediately tell us IVF is the way to go.
Mm.
And so there's two main processes for fertility for if people don't know. There's
Yep.
IUIs, which is basically the turkey baster method.
Mhm.
And then IVF is the big daddy. So,
Okay.
which is all the shots and the medications and all the things.
Yeah.
And so we were like, what? To just
Mhm.
immediately go from we're just trying naturally to
Yeah.
you have to do IVF.
I would feel the same way. Yeah.
And because of the way his semen analysis had come back, they said IUIs are a waste of time.
Okay.
So we decided to get a couple other opinions, and
Mhm.
he actually had some normal semen analyses from a couple other doctors. So I honestly, at this point, think that was a one-off. I think,
Yeah, like a fluke. It sat for too long, or who knows? Yeah.
I mean, and they're looking at million, they can't possibly look at every single sperm in there.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
look at a smaller sample of it and they
Uh-huh.
base. So yeah, so we talked about it and we just decided we're going to go with IVF. And because
Mhm.
the other doctors that got the normal semen analysis were like, well, you could do IUIs first. But we knew a lot of people that had spent a lot of money on that and then ended up
Mhm.
IVF. Anyways, so
Yeah.
that kind of started our journey. And I went into my first round of IVF thinking this is going to fix all my
This will
problems.
make us pregnant. Yeah.
Not
And
really anything
I
wrong
mean,
with
you hear
me.
so many people go through that. And I mean, I feel you probably know the statistic, but like a lot of people go through that and that's their answer. That's what they need. Yeah.
So when I started IVF or when I started trying to get pregnant, I think I guess it was IVF because that
Yeah.
was what really threw me into the infertility world. I think it was 1 in 8 was the
Okay. Yeah.
statistic of
See?
people struggling with infertility in the US. And it's
Wow.
now gone to like 1 in 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So anyways, so we, you know, embarked on our first IVF journey and I was convinced it was all going to work. And then we ended up with one embryo from that round,
Mm-hmm.
which was devastating
Yeah.
because you
And you
need
guys knew that
you.
wasn't typical. Yeah.
Yeah. So we decided to do the first half, which is the egg retrieval. The second half is basically the embryo transfer
Yeah.
where they put the embryo in. We decided to do another egg retrieval because they gave us like a 50-50 chance of that embryo working or failing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we were like, okay, well, let's try again, see if
And
we
do
can
you
get.
mind sharing like numbers? Because I know a lot of
Yeah.
people too, like that is a huge thing, is just the cost of this. And we'll obviously
Oh,
talk about Turkey and along with that. So like, do you mind like what when you and Colin first hear this and they're like, okay, you can do the IUI or you can do IVF. I'm assuming IVF was significantly more, but you're like, let's just go
yes.
for it. Just when you stepped into it, obviously after 8 years you've spent you'd probably throw up if you said the number, but like what
Yeah.
was that initial like what kind of numbers were you guys looking at?
So we picked a more affordable
Okay.
clinic on purpose because, you
Yeah,
know,
a
and
lot.
sure, you probably get what you pay for, but I'm also now like,
You've tried a
how
lot of different
different is
places.
the
Yeah.
science
Yes.
really?
Yeah.
I know the embryologists make a huge difference for sure, but
Okay.
you know, I really feel like all these doctors are doing the best they can for their patients. So
Totally.
So we picked a cheaper option, which at the time, their base price for IVF, I think was around like 9,000.
Okay, like that's wild. And that's cheap option. Yeah.
But that's not including the meds. So
Wow.
after that's just the process. And
Wow.
that's just the egg retrieval
And
process,
insurance doesn't cover that?
not
Wow.
mine.
Okay. Wow.
Some does, some states do,
Okay.
some companies do. I've heard through my process, I learned of women who were just going to work at Starbucks part-time to get the
If you
insurance
work for some
covered.
big name
Mhm.
corporation, you probably
Right.
have those benefits. But you and Colin are both very entrepreneurial. So yeah.
Yeah. So we've
Yeah.
always provided our own health insurance, which is expensive and then
Not,
doesn't cover much.
yeah.
And
Okay.
especially nothing labeled infertility in Colorado has just started changing that where they're starting to cover a little bit more.
Okay.
But I also just recently ran into an issue where they billed my insurance. I got the bill. My insurance said no to all of it.
My God.
And I called and I tried to be like, well, because they told me in the office, they're like, oh, well, if we could try to bill insurance and they may cover it.
I hate when they say
Problem is-
that. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is if they bill the insurance the higher price, and then if insurance doesn't cover it, you're responsible for the higher price, but
And
they
you just
have a
don't
cash
know
pay
until
price.
they come back. Yeah.
Right. So they have a cash pay price that's cheaper. That had I known that insurance
You
wasn't
would've
going to
just
cover
gone
it, I
that
would have just
route.
paid it. And they wouldn't negotiate with me. So I had to pay the insurance price. So
So frustrating to add to the list of
yeah.
frustrations. Keep going.
Yeah, don't even get me. I could go on a
Yeah.
whole other podcast on that
Yeah.
stuff. So, but anyway, so yeah, so we're looking at a base price of, let's say, $9,000. Meds ended up being, and I did so much research.
I bet
I
you did.
called all the different pharmacies, all the
Mhm.
different med, like got all of the different med prices because it varied.
Mhm.
There were like discount programs on the
Mhm.
websites for some of these meds that I was signing up for. I had to upload tax documents and things like that, just trying to get it as cheap as possible. And I still spent about $4,000
Wow.
on one round of meds.
Wow.
So anyways, so then the second egg retrieval that we did, the doctor had upped his prices, which as business people, we understand, right? So it was then $11,000 was the base for that and about 4,000 or 5,000 for meds. But also that second time he decided to put me on a few other extra meds to try to get a better outcome that were even more expensive. I think they wanted me on HGH, which is human growth hormone, for that one time was going to cost me like over $1,000 for that. So anyways, so we did the second egg retrieval, again, ended up with one embryo. So at this point we have 2 embryos.
Yeah.
And I decided, you know what, screw it. We're just gonna do a transfer. So I went in for a baseline ultrasound for that to make sure everything was okay before I started the meds. And I had a fibroid in my uterus that was actually protruding on the lining of my uterus. So had it stayed in the wall, it would have been fine. But it was kind of like doing like one of just protruding on the lining, which means an embryo is not going to attach there.
Stick to that. Yeah.
So then I had to have surgery. Doctor didn't get it all the first time because he was being overly cautious, which I appreciate, but I'm like, I need this thing gone. So I had to do it again. So it wasn't until so I started this process. My first egg retrieval was 2018.
Wow.
And this was 2020 at this point, because also I can't just pay for this stuff back to back.
No. Yeah.
Time between it, trying to build up the money. 2 surgeries then, which insurance did cover a lot of that. So that was helpful.
Okay, well, that's good.
And then went in 2020 and did my first transfer in June of 2020. And then I did my second, well, that one was unsuccessful. Did my second one in August of 2020, also unsuccessful. And so here we are, we've paid
who knows at this point. Yeah.
And we're back to square one.
Yeah.
And still, by the way, our diagnosis is unexplained infertility, which is actually a diagnosis, which is infuriating.
It is. But yeah, like on paper, everything should be working. And every time I've watched you go through this the last few rounds, like they're like, let's just tweak this one thing. It will give us extra, insurance that like it's going to work. And like each time you're like, this has to be the one. I'm just going to give it one more go. I'm just going to give it one more go. And as a friend watching you these last few years go through this, like I can't even imagine in your shoes, like how just taxing that is and exhausting that is. And so I guess maybe speed up because there's been a
Yep.
lot of rounds since then, but at the position of where you're at now, how much have you gone through number one?
So after that, we did, well, I guess, okay. So to save money, we went and did it overseas
Yeah.
to Turkey. So that was what you referenced earlier, was going to Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
So in Turkey, I did 2 egg retrievals and 3 embryo transfers.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in total, I guess I've done 5 egg retrievals,
Wow.
8 embryo transfers, multiple embryos. I mean, it got to the point where they were putting 2, 3 in me because that ups your chances. So we did the rounds in Turkey, and then I decided last year to do one last hurrah here.
Hail Mary, she said.
Yep. Also went to a slightly different clinic, different doctor, different take. They put me on a ton of immune suppressants and anti-inflammatories to try to like the theory is that my body is attacking the embryos.
Yeah.
That's the theory. Or that there's too much inflammation.
But even that, they tell you they don't know. This is their guess.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all a guess. So we did all these things this last year, did an egg retrieval. I actually had a decent outcome from this last egg retrieval. I ended up, I mean, but there are factors to that too.
And I feel like that's how they keep you stringing along because you're like, oh, this last one we had some progress, maybe we should go again. And I've watched you. It's just the last 2 you said this is gonna be it, and then this last one you're like, no, I'm gonna go again. And I'm assuming you're still kind of in the same place, but you can change your mind obviously at any moment. That's up to you. But right at this very moment, you guys are like, we have to step away from this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Last year was tough. The immune suppressants and the anti-inflammatories wrecked me. I got, and they put me on at one point like 5 different antibiotics. So
I remember that. It was like during
I
a
got
retreat.
thrush
From
that.
Yes.
Which was disgusting if anybody has ever had thrush.
I have had thrush before. It is horrible.
I think I would rather have a yeast infection over thrush
Yes.
any day.
Yeah, not in your mouth.
Which it is a yeast infection, but it's in your mouth. So
on
it's
your
just
tongue.
so gross. So gross. Actually, I think when I was at the retreat last year,
I was
still
a hard
fighting
time.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for many other reasons
Yeah.
too. So I also got the shingles last year from all the immune suppressants. So just a whole bunch of stuff. And then emotionally, so this is interesting. When we were waiting for our genetic testing results of our first round of embryos to come back, it was like New Year's. And I vividly remember this. My husband was like, what do we do? Because it was 2 embryos we had sent to genetic testing, and then one was deemed not viable. So we were left with the one. And he said, what if they come back both not viable? And my immediate answer was like, well, we just do this again. We just keep trying. Like in that moment, I was like, no, we just keep doing this.
You were just so certain that was just the answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, no, eventually it's got to work because it does for most people. Right.
Well, and let me also, from the outside looking and scrolling back on your Instagrams and stuff, when you first, correct me if I'm wrong, this has been my perspective, when you first got into this whole realm of this community, you really threw yourself into it. You're like, I am an IVF, like warrior. We're going to take this on. I'm going to join the thousands of women that I've connected with who become mothers through this. Like you were so in it. You threw yourself in it. You're like, this is my identity. We're doing this.
And I was very open about it too.
Yeah.
Social media with people. I was a little bit reluctant in the beginning, but then I was like, you know what, like, whatever, like, this is what we have to do. So.
Document it. It'll be memories to look back on because you were so hopeful. And I think what I've watched is just layer by layer by layer, that just hopefulness gets stripped away, and it fucking sucks, and it's heart-wrenching to watch, but it stops being fun to talk about. And we even talked about this before we were recording, like how we wanted to tie this into the podcast episode, and I'd love to hear you touch on this a bit. One, if you're going through obviously what you're talking about, which since being like having Soul Tribe and connecting with so many women, my story, getting pregnant very young and things like that. I also didn't realize how many people infertility affected. I also am very aware that I took my fertility for granted, and like it's just the perspective that it gives you. But navigating it with your clients, going from being so open to being like, I just want to crawl into the ground and not see people, but like I have 8 weeks of clients booked and we got to pay all these bills. Like, how did you navigate that? And do you have any, things you wish you would have done differently or anything like that?
I mean, it's hard because I do appreciate being open about it. I think it takes the stigma away from it. I think,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a more normalized conversation. People learn from you. They like,
Mm-hmm.
they become more aware of the situation where it was so taboo to talk about even a miscarriage,
Yeah.
from time, which is still kind of that way.
Yeah.
But it is lifting the veil a little bit. And so I did want to do my part in that,
Mm-hmm.
to give people awareness, because I do think, and not to anyone's fault of their own,
Mm-hmm.
but even my sister is one who had no problems getting pregnant, had a baby at
Mm-hmm.
19 as well. And like, yeah, she had no idea how lucky she was,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have done that. And lucky, she was 19, there were struggles with that too. I'm not
But
discounting that,
totally.
but yeah, I mean, there were even a few times throughout my journey where she said some things that I was like,
Mhm.
what? You just said
She
that to
didn't
me?
realize it would hurt. And I've
Right.
learned so much. And
Mhm.
you live through your own life circumstances. So we all have a whole different story that we've heard and what our loved ones have been through, but knowing you, Tawny, and watching you have those moments, like people just don't realize some of the hurtful
Yeah.
shit that they said. And I know your clients love you and we're trying
Mhm.
to support you, but like these little comments that would make, oh, my so and so adopted or did surrogacy or did all of
Yeah.
these things that you're just like, oh my God, I'm fucking exhausted. Could you stop?
Yeah. And to be perfectly honest, like, okay, so I was open about it in the beginning. And I mean, where am I trying to go with this thought?
It's okay.
I'm still working through that,
Yeah.
of trying to figure it out, because now I've come to the process of I won't be pursuing treatment. I know that in my heart of hearts and my soul of souls.
Yeah.
Do I know that I won't be pursuing anything else? Not really at the moment, but right
Yeah.
now I don't have the capacity for
No.
anything else, and any more
No.
heartbreak and any more
Mm-hmm.
hopes and dreams getting crushed. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
sounds dramatic, but that's how it feels.
No, it
So,
sounds very
um,
appropriate. Yeah.
so now, in the beginning it was, oh, you're trying to get pregnant? Try this, try this, try this. I actually had a,
Everyone's a doctor all of a sudden.
this is
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite things to share.
Mm-hmm.
Client doesn't see me anymore, so I'll share this
Yeah.
anyway. But
Yeah.
she actually told me one time, she was very religious and she had 4 children. And she said that every time she conceived a child, she yelled God's name during sex, and that's how she got pregnant. So this is the stuff that people would tell me, like not just like the
Oh my
standard,
God.
yeah, not just the
Oh my
standard,
God.
put your feet up on the wall, hang upside down after sex. Like, I mean, a whole
Wow.
plethora of things that people
Wow.
would tell me to
And
try.
I've learned it's so fascinating. And again, I don't really have my own experience of this, but many years ago, one of my sister's best friend's son was going through cancer treatments. Like he was diagnosed with like a brain tumor as an infant, like at his 1 year birthday. And they did a lot of fundraisers and stuff, and they grew quite a bit of followings. She would get the most bizarre messages as well of like how to cure cancer, as if this entire team of doctors
Yeah.
in Chicago didn't know what they were talking about. And this lady on Facebook saying to give him, marijuana gummies or something is the answer. Like it's just bizarre.
And being open on social media, I
Opens you up to
have
that. Yeah.
received messages from people from high school that I didn't even really talk to in high school.
Yeah.
They were like, hey, the universe is speaking to me to reach out to you, because they were promoting some diet, or
Oh,
they
this
were,
MLM or something.
yeah. And then I have had numerous people offer to be my surrogate, which is such an unselfish thing and so
Yeah.
kind of them. But I
Yeah.
also don't think they really realize what that
What they're
entails.
and like, yeah, that's just, yeah.
And I appreciate it, but really in full transparency, I think the only person I would use as a surrogate is like my sister. So
Yeah. Well, and I've even heard people say that like in a lighthearted, joking way. And again, that's what I've learned from you. Not that you want to be this like, this is how you should talk police, but since knowing you, Tawny, I have become so much more socially aware of just
Mm,
little things that people make with good intentions.
yeah, absolutely.
But it's just like, no, that's not it.
Mm,
That's not the answer. And sometimes you just need to listen to somebody and allow it to suck and not have a
mhm.
solution and not have a lighthearted like joke at the end of it and just let them
Yeah,
hurt in front of you and
yeah.
not have to solve that,
And just say, I'm sorry that you're going
Yeah.
through that. It really sucks,
Yeah.
because you can't fix it for them. That's the reality.
Yeah.
So they just need love and
Yes.
support. And that is
Totally.
that is something I have learned from this journey. And if there is a silver lining coming out of it, like my compassion and my empathy has changed dramatically through this journey. So, and I'm grateful for that. But yeah, as far as navigating the clients, like it was those things early on, and then they would listen to my IVF story or they would follow me on social media. And the problem was, is they were always waiting
for an answer, hoping to celebrate with
find
you.
out. Yeah, of course, and I unfortunately never had good news to share, but so that was also tough because then I started getting to a point where I'm like, do I keep sharing this? Because they're now waiting to hear.
You don't want to keep sharing bad news. Yeah.
I had a couple clients starting to ask the other girls in the salon when I was in the back, like, is Tawny pregnant yet? Just things which again, they mean well.
Yeah, but it feels icky being the one that everyone's whispering about.
Yeah. And I'm like, I will tell you, you will know
we will
at some
celebrate.
point, right?
Yeah.
So then, fast forward to now we've had all these failures. We've struggled heavily, and I don't want to talk about it as much, but I also still want people to be aware. And I do still want to, spread the knowledge and spread the, and then especially being in the position I'm in, because I am getting, well, what about surrogacy? Well, what about adoption? And it starts to feel in that regard, like if I don't pursue those things or I don't want to pursue those things, that I'm not doing everything I possibly can. I don't really be a mom that bad.
Oh, that's a twisted narrative, but yeah.
And I know people aren't meaning it that way.
But that's painful that's where your mind goes. And we do that about a million things. Mom guilt will do that to you, business owner, like you make up stories, but that's what you hear when people ask you that, not that that's what they mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's painful. And that's what I've learned too, is sometimes it's better to just keep those thoughts to yourself because you think that you're helping. But I remember you used to say that like they'd bring up surrogacy as if that was like groundbreaking. You never heard of it before. Like obviously you've considered it at this point,
Yeah, especially at this point. I mean, and there's a lot to be said about I want my own biological children. So yeah, I could do donor eggs, donor sperm. But I would like to carry my own biological child. And
I also don't think you need to explain that, and for some people that's so great for them and fostering an adoption is so great for them. But I think I've just learned you just don't have to ask people their reasoning behind that because that's so personal and so just what is in your own heart and your husband's heart that is not anybody else's business. So, okay, let's transition this into, I think, your podcast, because what I have loved, and I put this podcast out and Tawny's like, I've always kind of wanted to do a podcast at this point I'm at in my life right now. You told me your vision behind it and we did a one-on-one and I feel so excited about it and so good about it. And I think your mission is so important. And so it's Radiant Resilience is the name of it, and her take, and you can share in your own words, but what I took from it is just everything you hear on podcast, online, social media, a book, like there's always this like beginning, middle, and end, and there's a happy ending and there's a resolution and there's a, tie it up in a bow, this is it. And it's been beautiful and insightful watching you navigate that, and now just wanting to shine a light on like that is not always the answer. Shit, it can just be really, really hard without there being this big lesson wrap up resolution at the end. And so go ahead and share, I guess, your vision with the podcast.
I always thought that I would do something to help this community, the infertility community. I think I've mentioned that to you before. Like I want to do something to help, but I don't know what that looks like. And I have always felt like I did kind of need to get on the other side of it a little bit to get to that point. So my podcast, though, I want to preface by saying that is not just about infertility. So for those of you who think it's just about that, like that will be a piece of it because that's my story. But I want to shed light on all the different aspects in life that people struggle with. So through my journey, there were several times I felt alone, isolated, and intellectually, I know that's not true. I know obviously 1 in 6 people struggle with infertility. However, I would like to look up the statistics on people who don't ever end up pregnant through
all the,
because I think that's pretty low. But anyway, so especially in the last year or so, I have felt extremely alone in my journey and like nobody gets it because, and it is true to a degree that nobody has walked in my shoes and people won't understand your journey or story exactly to a T because they haven't walked exactly in your shoes, but people can have compassion and empathy. So I just wanted to find a place that we can talk about our struggles, which is hard. It's hard. It's not, I'm not taking that lightly.
It's not the most lighthearted thing in the world, but it's
I
also
know.
important. Yeah.
It is. And to know that you're not the only one, because I do think one of my main things is like social media makes everything look so perfect. And I've actually been having some interesting conversations about this because some people just don't want to share that kind of stuff on social media. And I get that. So it's not that they're trying to make their lives look perfect and like there's nothing wrong. They're just like, well, I don't want to put that on social media.
It's
That's
uncomfortable. Yeah.
And I respect that as well, but it does promote this lifestyle that
and then it makes everyone feel really alone when all they're
Yeah.
seeing is other
What's
people's
wrong with
highlight
me?
reels.
What's wrong with me because I'm not living that life or, you know, stuff like that. So it's basically just, I'm doing a lot of interviews and we'll see how it transforms and stuff too. But I'm talking to a lot of people just about their life struggles, and some are still very much in the midst of it. Some are on the other side of it. So in those stories, you know, you get hope that there is a light at the end of the tunnel eventually. But I'm also still very much in the midst of my struggle. And you know, I will probably have an emotional day where I might do a recording of my own emotions on it because I'm very much in the middle of it. And I think that people don't talk about it when they're in the middle of it. And I get, again, I fully respect that
why.
that's
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Because there are days I'm like, don't talk to me. I don't want to talk about
But
it.
you're willing to be the brave person to say, I'll start, you know, here's what I have going on. And then those that do feel comfortable sharing, I think the concept behind it is brilliant. Obviously, like I said, I went on it. I shared personal things that I haven't shared anywhere else because it is uncomfortable. And for me, it was uncomfortable because it's other people's stories. And I feel like, who am I to like share that? But it's what makes us who we are. And sometimes that's, you know, an act of God, or that is other people, or that's abuse, or that's whatever, you know, but I just think it's really, really, really neat what you're doing. So I'll definitely make sure to link that in all the places so that you guys can find that. Any other thoughts, Tawny? Anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. We touched on a lot of stuff. So
We did. Yeah, it was good. It was really good. I know I almost interrupted you when we started talking about insurance and things to talk about your real estate investments because Tawny is a very well-rounded individual. She has a lot of fascinating information on so many things, but I'm like, Lisa, we need to keep it at these right now. So maybe one day we'll touch on that as well, along with many other things.
Not as exciting as the other things. So
it's not, but it is really cool. And I could ask you questions for an hour about that, but we'll save that for another day. Thank you for opening up. You are so good at that. You give your vulnerability so freely. And I know sometimes that bites you and you have to feel the feelings of that, but I'm grateful for you just like letting me into your heart. And I know a lot of people in Soul Tribe feel the same way. And hopefully somebody listening this landed with that needed that today. So thank you.
so.
I love you. I'm grateful.
I love you too.
For you.
Thanks
All right,
for having me.
Of course. Thank you, friends, so much for listening. I will talk to you on the next episode.